The work the SAG Foundation is doing is enormously important. From the up-and-coming actors to the veterans like myself, the foundation is here to help all of us.
As fellow artists, we've all been there. It's crucial that we remember where we came from and help out however we can.
For over 25 years, the SAG Foundation has been the industry's best-kept secret, and we're out to change that.
As natural storytellers, it's great that we have the opportunity to give back through the Children's Literacy Program.
A disaster like Sandy really brings it home with how crucial the SAG Foundation is. Their donation drive helped so many people in need.
The seminars and workshops are crucial. Working together is what makes us better.
The SAG Foundation is a nonprofit organization that relies solely on donations to keep these important programs free for everyone.
The SAG Foundation can't do it alone. We need you.
If you need help, ask.
If you can help, give.
We're all in this together.
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 Together, everyone benefits.
Join the cause.
Act now.
How cool was that? Yeah. Welcome to our live stream viewers who are online now. Thank you for viewing. Part of the ways that, in our mission is to inform and educate, and we're trying to get the word out more through our social media. So we have a Facebook page we'd hope you'd like. Get information there. YouTube.com/SAG Foundation is archive video. The live stream's there. For you guys, if you didn't get something that you're like, oh, I missed this piece of information, go home. You can watch it. Also, Twitter, twitter.com/SAG Foundation. We encourage you to retweet things that you heard tonight, not during the event, obviously, but when you go home, or if you're on the computer right now. So please do that. Please like the pages. Please follow us, because again, like the surveys, that helps us show that we're reaching more and more people. The last thing I want to talk about is this idea that we are a nonprofit and we need your donations. We do not get your initiation fees and dues. That's a misnomer, so I want to repeat that. We are a nonprofit. We do not get your initiations. We do not get dues. It's purely on donations and grants. So something we're doing in 2013 is right next to Graham over there that Caroline's going to demonstrate is a box that you have the opportunity to slip a $1 bill in, slip $5 bill in the end of the evening to show your supports. Every dollar counts, and we need your help in doing that. Also for the live stream, and if you don't have cash, as some people don't sometimes, we have the donate button on the website. We encourage you to maybe be sustaining members, because we average between 20 and 28 events per month. $5 a month for potential 28 events per month. I don't know if you're going to find a better deal in town. So maybe if you're willing to give $5 a month, we can add that even to more events and have more opportunities for you guys to participate. So if you can, do please give. We also help with finances. So if you do need help, give us a call. We help people if you know someone in help. So that's a little bit about that. We're going to have a great evening tonight. I want you to introduce our moderator, Graham Clark.
I'm Graham Clark. Thank you for coming out tonight. For those of you who are here joining us in Hollywood, and for those of you who may be joining us at home, wherever you may be, either tonight or in our archived event, thank you for spending some time with us in understanding the role of the publicist. So I suspect we all kind of have a different, that's probably better. I really got to eat this microphone, I guess. Okay. So we probably come from a pretty dispersed background, and so we probably want to understand how Publicist works and when we engage with them and what we can expect from them. So we have three esteemed colleagues who are going to come and join us from the panel. I'm going to actually just introduce them. First up, we have Nicole Perez-Krueger, who's the Vice President of PMK BNC. And we have Richard Hoffman, who actually has a pretty diverse background. He started in television production and has been in PR for quite some time now. I'll let all of them tell a little bit more about their bio. And then last but certainly not least is the newly married Jillian Roscoe. Welcome to the stage. So I suppose, first up, why don't you all tell us a little bit about yourself? Would you like to begin, Nicole?
My name's Nicole. I started in PR, I think probably 18 or so years ago. as an assistant, worked my way up. I started at Rogers & Cowan. I was there for probably 16 or 17 years, and I just moved to PMK about a year and a half ago. I worked primarily with actors and actresses, especially when I was starting, and kind of transitioned into some music talent and also more of the reality, branding, fashion kind of talent. So I kind of do a little bit of it all.
Hi, I'm Richard Hoffman, and as Graham said, I started my career in television production and development, and left that field and wanted a new journey. So for whatever reason, when I worked on television movies or series, I always gravitated towards working with the publicist on the show or the movie. And a friend said, well, can I introduce you to Warren Cowan? So I said, well, if I'm going to meet someone in the industry, it might as well be Warren Cowan. So I met with Warren Cowan, which is another long story I'll tell another time. But Warren said, well, I don't know you, you don't know me. He said, why don't we try it for 2 weeks and we'll see where we go. So I got to stay with Warren for 15 years. So the 2 weeks turned out to be 15 years of being with the man. There was no one like Warren. There never will be anyone like Warren. I was with Warren until he passed away, and then I opened up my own firm a few years ago.
Hi, I'm Jillian Roscoe. I'm Vice President of Talent at ID. I've been there for almost 11 years. Before that, I was doing consumer PR, and I made the switch quickly because the media didn't care as much about promoting toilet paper and toothpaste as they did promoting actors. So I realized that early on and made the switch, and I've been at ID the whole time. I work with people such as Jim Parsons, Lake Bell, Rashida Jones, Ty Burrell. I don't know if we're going to cover this later, but Judy Greer, Rachel McAdams, Gerard Butler, a range. I guess the common theme is all of my clients are very nice and they're wonderful, and I feel like it's important to work with people like that because life's too short. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you, folks. So you touched on something here, and I know that Nicole also touched on it, but one of the things that Nicole wanted to drive home is that a publicist isn't necessarily interested solely, or at least these folks perhaps, in making you famous, but instead in developing relationships. So do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I remember when I started, my boss was really adamant, and it was kind of a joke in the office, but it's the relations part of public relations that I enjoy the most. And we used to always hear it, and we kind of put it on our wall, and it was this little joke. But as I, grew into kind of becoming my own publicist and working with clients, I really realized, and especially in this day and age, there's a very distinct difference between publicity. There's the people that are famous just for being famous, and there's the people that have talent and use a publicist to kind of build those relationships. So it's very much different than when I think we all started. And for me, the beauty is really making sure that my clients maintain relationships and with their fans and also with the people in the industry so that they continue to work, so that the work comes first and you build on that. And I think even when you're just starting out, those relationships that you make when you're on set, even if you're an extra, you don't have any lines, but people see you and they say, oh, I remember him. He was so great to work with. Or, that is so important. And that's the hardest thing also to repair. So for me, that when you say to my clients, that's the most important thing, that I represent them and maintain those relationships.
Did you want to touch on that?
Nicole, you hit upon something very important, is that recently an actor just came to me and said, I worked with this producer a while ago and I never heard from him again. Well, what I say is, if you're working on a project, whether it be a film or a TV series, and you enjoyed the process, as opposed to also an email, just take out a handwritten note and send a note to the producer or the director you work with saying what a pleasure it was to work with them. And then, I'm not saying once a year or suppose they get another film or television project, all you just have to send a little congratulatory, say, I read about this in the trades, best of luck with the project. It puts it in the head, and it's that connection again, as Nicole was talking about, as far as just keeping that relationship going, which is very important. But they're not, sometimes, yes, they can call your agent or your manager, but it's important for you also to keep the relationship going.
At that point too about, because we're in such an age now of like Twitter and email, and a written note is so amazing. And I still have, one of the last people that wrote me like a handwritten note was Bernie Brillstein. And he sent me something and he said, call me the pizza man because I always deliver. And it was this comb. It was so silly. We were with Rob Lowe and he had this comb on his fingers and he was going like this with his hair. And I was like, Bernie, that's the coolest comb ever. And the next day it was in my office with that note. And that note is really, so you don't get that much anymore. So it's like that personal touch is really interesting and special, I think.
And I would just add that it's so important to have, as publicists, we're speaking on our client's behalf, and a lot of times we're having conversations that they would be having themselves, but they don't. So we have to make sure we're acting in a way that represents them appropriately. And so when we're dealing with the press, it's true, you get more bees with honey. So no matter how difficult someone is being towards you, how unreasonable, the minute you stoop to their level, you've lost complete power of the situation. And you have to be honest, you have to make good. I had a situation with a client whose wife was pregnant, and an outlet found out, and we just didn't want to announce it because you just never know, it's sensitive. The outlet was totally above board, didn't announce it, because they said, we just hope that when the time comes, you'll come to us. Baby was born, that was the first place we went to. And I was talking to my client who said, I feel so weird announcing it. Does it really matter? It'll just come out. And I said, don't feel weird, because everybody does. And it's going to get out there sooner rather than later. And because this outlet was really cool and, honored their word, we should do the same thing by saying, listen, we remembered you guys were cool. We're going to give you the exclusive. We're going to break it with you. And they appreciated that. And then also, too, if you break it, you have a better chance of controlling how it will be messaged. So just little things like that are just so important to follow through on, and you don't see it very often, sadly. And so when you do it, it really makes a difference, and it's such an easy thing to do that it's good to be mindful of that stuff.
One of the things I was really curious about as an actor myself, and not really knowing much about the PR world, is I wonder if you guys could tell us a little bit about what actually goes on behind closed doors. Do you work with an entire team? Do you have specialties? Do you strategize? Show us the inside of your firm without giving away any secrets, if you could.
Well, I think it's different for every firm and every publicist. People like to work in a different way. I don't think there's a right way and a wrong way. And I think that's an interesting point. There's so many publicity firms, and I like to always say when I take a meeting, if you come to any of us on the stage, we probably have the same contacts. We've been doing this long enough that we know who to call if we want to, talk to someone at GQ. But it's a lot of a personality thing, and we're all very different, and talent is very different. So I would say when you even meet with a publicist, ask the questions, see if they would answer them in the way that you would. And not to say that it's right or wrong. I have colleagues that are a little more forceful and some that are a little more soft-spoken. They're a reflection of you. So make sure that that person is somewhat compatible with who you feel that you are as as an actor and as a person. Personally, I'm a little more hands-on than most people. I see my assistants laughing because I'm a schedule freak, but I think it's different. We like to strategize. I like to really involve my clients because I feel that it's important. But sometimes people don't want to be involved. They want to say, "You handle it. That's what I pay you for." And again, there's no right or wrong, but really we like to think things out. And not just do things haphazardly. A lot of our clients have a lot of projects in one year. So you don't want to do everything for that first project because what are you going to do 3 months later for that second project? So it's kind of thinking, okay, what do I do here? And really thinking it out. Some of our clients like to come in and say, let's plan for the year. And it doesn't always go that way, but you try to plan and be strategic as much as you can, I think.
We view publicity as a tool to be an extension of what you and your team are already trying to achieve out of your career. We're in the long-term marketing sort of world of PR with our clients. We don't want to just represent them for that one project. We want it to be throughout their career. So you can really grow someone. Their press kit should grow in tandem with their career. And we love the feedback from the agents and managers, like, you know what, casting agents just don't find this person sexy enough. Okay, let's change that. How can we change that perception? Because truly, it is sometimes as easy as putting an image in front of a producer or casting director, and then suddenly they get it. And you think that sometimes those people should be the ones thinking outside the box, but it doesn't. So you want to give those tools to your client and team so that they can further whatever it is they're trying to achieve. And, you know, every single, I would say sort of, you know, to touch on a little bit more, it's all about timing as well. Not every project you have is going to be a press moment. And you have to have those honest conversations with your client, because otherwise you're going to have unrealistic expectations. I've had clients, you know, who've been clients for 10 years. That doesn't mean they're actively on fee with me all the time, because they may have a movie opening, but it may not just be a moment. It might be a movie that no one cares about, or it might be a role that we've seen a lot, so the press aren't like hungry for it. Now, we can certainly be involved and help coordinate all the logistics and oversee it, because I think a lot of times clients feel more comfortable having us do that, but it may not be the film where suddenly everybody's going to be talking about you, or it might not be a role where it's awards worthy. And you really have to give that honest feedback in a timely manner so that they understand that you're representing them properly and you're not just throwing them a bunch, you know, of BS. It's also important too, I think, to really press for an answer with everything. If you're getting a no, you need to understand why an outlet is passing. You need to understand, bless you, you need to understand why a network doesn't like that move, or why a studio doesn't like that move. If you don't understand their rationale, you're not going to be able to work effectively. We sort of like to think if an outlet passes or gives us a no, they just don't really understand. I need to know why this outlet isn't excited about my client so I can work on changing that. Maybe it's as simple as having them go to a dinner where the editor is going to be and suddenly they fall in love with each other and we get a feature. Sometimes it takes more legwork. But whatever it is, if you can't give your client that tangible feedback, then you almost need it to kind of protect yourself in a way. So they don't say to you, why don't I have this feature? Why don't I have this feature? You know, and it's not fun to work with clients who don't want to hear that, because then you can't do anything. We're there to make a difference, change the perception, maybe help whatever it is. But again, you need that honest communication. And if you don't press people for an answer, you're never going to be able to do your job. And on the flip side, when we pass, we should give people an answer. You know, I think a lot of times people just say no and don't explain themselves. That's not fair, because the person on the other end has to report to someone too. And we're in PR, so we should be able to, you know, elegantly pass on something and not have it ruffle feathers.
I agree. Collaboration is so important, and whether someone has a manager or an agent, everyone being on the same page and having that connection and speaking to each other. You know, there are certain clients that you may find that want to go to a red carpet event every single night. Well, at the end of the day, it's the same crews out there, it's the same photographers, and you want to go sometimes for a reason. So sometimes, as opposed to just saying, here's an invitation, you want to go or not, saying, you know what, here's an invitation, and you worked on this project with the man who's being honored, so it might be good to go, even if you can go for an hour or so and be there. So exactly, it's talking, and it's also, you know, putting things out there, as far as we were talking earlier about bios. You know, sometimes if I start working with someone, they'll say, I'll say, send over your bio, and they send over credits. Credits are not a bio. You should at least have some type of skeleton of a bio, and pick things that are going to be interesting to press as well, and to also casting directors or producers, because whether you have a website or not, people will look at the bio. So if you know, grew up on a horse ranch and you love horseback riding, put that in your bio, because you never know if a casting director at TNT is working on a Western and might pick that up and say, let me bring her in for that role. So it's creating that image as well, and it's doing work. You know, there's work to be done also before, you know, you get to be with a publicist, or if you're working with a publicist. So it's also that just communication between people.
And I think to further that, and I think it also goes back to the not doing press just to be famous. It's not just to be on a red carpet, but like Jillian said, it's, you know, what are we going to do to help get your next project, to help your agents and managers. So sometimes there would be a client that maybe, I don't think that a Wall Street Journal story would make sense. They're just a reality star. But if an agent calls and says, but we're this close to making a huge deal with a major retailer for branding, well, then maybe a pop culture story in a newspaper would make sense for someone that's atypical. So it's really figuring out, what do we want to promote? And while we're promoting it, how do we pick and choose outlets and even writers, we kind of cast our interviews. We don't just go in and they assign us a writer and a photographer and we send our client to show up. It's, let's help pick who the photographer should be and who the writer should be and work with them so that we're kind of branding and formatting the story to then help our clients. It goes past that one film. The film helps the studio, but what's going to help you as the actor?
Exactly. And also with a lot of campaigns, it's two campaigns. It's reaching the 250 producers, writers, directors, and casting people, and it's also reaching the consumers. So sometimes there's two campaigns and different outlets that you go to and different venues that you appear at. So it's really two different campaigns sometimes also.
Yeah, and I guess, the studio, the network, whomever, they're always going to have different objectives than you are as a representative. So it's a delicate balance of finding the way to keep them happy, but also protect your client. They want quantity, right? They want as many people to buy tickets. They want as many people to tune in on the TV or via internet, whatever it is. We care not more, but we care about the quality always over the quantity. And so we never want the quality of the press or the quality of our client's image to suffer just for the sake of high numbers. Because look, you hear about people who sell magazine covers and then they can't open a movie. Or someone is huge on a movie, but their magazine covers tank. It just, what I mean? There's so many things that factor into a successful opening, a successful TV show, play, book launch, whatever. You've just got to make sure that you're always protecting your client. But again, you can't blow people off because this producer could be, on the next film. It could be a network exec who's casting, whatever. You don't want the agent or manager to get calls saying so-and-so turned down the cover of Maxim. They have to do, you've got to understand what they were trying to achieve with that particular piece of press. Let them know why it's sort of not working, and then come up with like a happy medium so both of you guys can be happy and move forward. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you just have to stay strong and protect your client and not cave, because ultimately it would be to the detriment of the client. But as you're having those honest conversations, I feel like there's a lot of themes that keep popping up with what we're saying, but it all makes a difference because then someone understands where you're coming from, they feel like you're hearing them, and then you collectively move on. Now, there are times that you sometimes may have to do something for a litany of reasons, but if that happens, we then try to, as we do with everything that our clients engage in, really protect them as much as possible, vet it so it can be a good experience for them.
So we've talked quite a bit about relationships that we as actors will be able to utilize through you, the established relationships that you've had. But I think one of the biggest things that we as actors would like to know is, at what point will we, the actor, be ready to engage in a relationship with you? And then what do you look for as the corollary?
I think that there's something to be said, and I say this to people that come, and ask for meetings when I think it's too early, and more so because I don't want to see someone waste their hard-earned money if it's something that I don't think we can really deliver on yet. There's publicists for the studios, for the networks. There's unit publicists when you're on films, and they're kind of looking, we're all here for the common good at that point, is to promote the project. And they've got people like us kind of saying, oh, well, it's not right for our client who's this A-list lead. But if you come up and make your presence known and, meet that person, you see them on set every day, introduce yourself, say, well, I know that maybe I'm a guest star or the fifth lead, but listen, I'm happy to do press, and I really like to do press. If there's anything that you want me to do, and follow up with them. I think it's just making those connections and kind of, being your biggest advocate before you come to us, so that when you're coming to us, you also have some stuff under your belt and have some press. Or if there's somebody that's written, a review and they call out, and I loved this, this person and it's you, write that writer's name down, like you said, send them a note, shoot them an email, hey, I read this, thanks so much, and just keep in contact with them. Know who your fans are from the beginning and kind of keep track of it, because those are going to somewhat be your go-to people and press people as well.
I agree, and what Nicole just said, literally I had a call a few weeks ago from an actor who said that they were doing a film and the unit publicist never came up to them. And they didn't have, a gigantic role, but I said, you should have gone up to them, and exactly what Nicole is saying. Not when E or Extra is with them on the set, but if there's a lunch break or something, just go over and say, I'm thrilled to be a part of this production, how can I support you? Also, sometimes I think all three of us get phone calls from an actor or an actress who says, I'm in this new TV film or a cable film, and I want PR. When is it coming out? It's coming out next week. Too late. Cable pubs, long lead magazines, you're looking at syndicates which feed all the papers across the country. You're looking at 6 weeks out. You have to prepare in advance for that if you're not ready for a publicist during the production, once you hear about the launch date or the premiere date, then that's the time to call to see if you're ready to have a publicist at that time for that project. Don't wait until it's about to air, because it's just too late for PR.
And you also, if you're an up-and-comer or a breakout situation, you have to, and they say, okay, great, can we see the film? And the studio's not screening it, what are you going to do? There's nothing. Do you know what I mean? Like, if your work is there, it'll speak for itself. But you need to make sure the studio, the network, whomever, are allowing the material to be seen. Otherwise, you're going to be at a standstill. In which case, better to maybe just save your money. Perhaps once it opens, if it's a platform release or whatever, if it's a TV show where there's 12 episodes or 26 episodes where there could be more time to do stuff after the fact, then you could bring someone on. But you need people to be able to see the work, because again, your press really should be about the work. And as Richard was saying, the time frame on it, there are women's magazines whose covers are booked till December. We're in February. Every single month is booked. So, sometimes it's out of your control. If a movie switches release dates, you had a cover and now you're not going to do it anymore. You shot it and it's still going to come out, and I'm sure you've seen that where someone's on a cover but they're talking about it, but then the movie isn't coming out for 6 more months. It's because it moved. Sometimes you can catch it in time, sometimes you can't. But if you're not working so far in advance, you're going to miss out. It's better for you to pitch an editor and them say, you know what, we're not on October yet, come back to me in 2 months, as opposed to pitching them in July and they're saying, well, October's pretty much done. You've missed an opportunity.
And to see the film, like you think, you shot all these days and you think you're in it, and well, you haven't seen it, you hire a publicist, and wow, they cut out your most important scene, Even when our clients come to us and we're slated and we've got movies, until we see it or the client sees it, we don't even start talking, because you never know what's going to happen. And you want to promote something that you can be proud of, especially if this is going to be your first, if you're an up-and-comer and this is the first time people are going to take notice. Well, make sure that you feel really good about it and about your work.
And also sometimes, I'm sure you guys get to, someone will say, well, I want to be on Ellen and I want to be on People. I'm like, well, this is your first role. They're going to ask for a tape. So first maybe we should do a local TV show, and maybe we should do, a newspaper or a syndicate, so that we have some things to build from. And I usually say, then I'm not the publicist for you, because it's a building process. And if you're not familiar to the bookers at the shows or the journalists at the magazines or newspapers, it's a building process. All that will hopefully come, but you have to start somewhere to at least build on that website or that press kit, if you still send press kits. But it's a building process.
And when you do Ellen or anything, you have to then sort of be strategic about, okay, who are you on the show with? If you're going to be second guest, does it make sense that you're second guest to the person who's the lead guest? Because that sort of sets the tone and a perception of you. You want your appearance to be as successful as possible. So you want to think about all those factors going into it. You do a pre-interview in advance. Are your stories working? Are they not? If you're listening in on a client's pre-interview and they're not funny, you need to tell them, because better to tell them so that they can work on it before they go out on Ellen or Kimmel or whatever, as opposed to having them do the show and then it bombs and then you have no tape to get them something else. And from there, there's also a hierarchy with all the talk shows, and show A will follow show B, and show B conflicts with show C, and so you have to be mindful of that when you're opening a film. If you have 3 films in a year, okay, maybe this one feels more Leno, or maybe this is more Letterman, and then we're going to follow it up with Ferguson, but then Ferguson could conflict with Fallon. I mean, it's all that, and so you have to be aware of what's going on. Otherwise, you're going to get the bookers mad, because they're going to say, oh, but why did you book them on this show? It's a direct conflict. You have to really be open and totally transparent with them, and, again, make good on your word. If you say, I'm not doing you this time because we're doing Leno, but we're going to do you next time, you've got to honor that. And if a situation comes up where you can't, like maybe the person can't go to New York this time, proactively tell the booker that we know we said we're going to do you next, we can't go to New York, we have to stay in LA, we're going to be doing Kimmel instead, because they're going to find out anyway. It's a national talk show. So better for them to hear it from you as opposed to them feeling like you're trying to dupe them. And then going forward, they're not going to do you a solid if you say, like, trust me, this guy is hysterical, like, you're going to love him as a guest, all that stuff. And it's also important to keep in mind, you normally start out as a second guest, which is appropriate, when you make that jump to a lead guest. And a lot of times, it might be better to not do another booking as a second guest and to hold to get that lead guest status, because that helps elevate you. If you just always accept the second, and there's some people who are fantastic second guests and they're going to be second guests forever. It's not a bad thing. But if you have someone who could be lead guest material, if you're always accepting the second guest spot, you're never going to be able to move them forward. And then you can't move that to go up sort of the ranks of the TV shows. So there's a lot of stuff that plays into doing an appearance.
And especially if the lead guest is someone that is very similar to you. You know what I mean? There could be said that maybe you're on that cusp between lead and second, but then the lead guest is Meryl Streep. Okay, well then maybe I'll go second, And that's a conversation we'll have, but very often, sometimes it's better to pass if it's two very similar people and you're following them, you're kind of setting a precedence that you don't want to set. But that's interesting that you said that about the talk shows, because I have a client who just by happenstance, we always start in LA, and so he always does Leno. And Letterman just, she was like, come on, So it made me so happy. Literally 7 months in advance, I was like, we're starting in New York, and we can book April 22nd. And it was like really nice to honor your word. And so those kind of things, those little things make a big difference, I think.
Speaking of little things and getting your feet wet and starting to become familiar with these environments, whether you're a second guest or a first guest, I think many people would be delighted to be almost just in the audience for some of these shows. But how much I think it's pretty accurate to say that we want to engage your services so that you can help us hone an image so that ultimately we can get our next job and then our next job after that. So we're really putting a lot of trust in you. And so could you talk a little bit about some of the coaching that you might do, maybe whether it be for prior to in the interview, maybe that just goes to, print or online, or maybe before a red carpet event, and how do you strategize with us as far as image and putting together our press kits and what we're going to dress like? Is there hairstyles that we need to be concerned with, things like that? How much coaching and hand-holding do you do for us?
So much. Every request that goes to our clients has an example of the feature that they're doing, a link to the talk show, so that they know exactly what is it. We're not just saying it's a feature in X magazine, it's this feature in this issue, and it's this particular angle, etc. See the example, make sure it's something you want to do. Once they're committed to it, it's fully vetted, from the photographer to the hair and makeup to the styling, every single thing imaginable, because at the end of the day, press stays with you for pretty much ever, so you want to make sure it turns out well. And you don't, think about it, advertising, you pay for it, right? So you can control the image, the placement, the type font, what you're saying exactly. You don't have that same control with PR. So you put your clients in situations where you feel it's a safe situation for them to excel. You put them in environments and talk shows and outlets that you know are safe. and you prep your client as much as possible, because if they're not comfortable, if they don't understand this is supposed to be a funny, humorous interview, it's going to come across, and it's going to show on their face, even if they don't say something. If there's a question they don't like, that they don't know how to answer, the days of publicists really being that wall and saying, you can't ask my client this, otherwise you're not going to have access, don't exist. So the worst thing to do would be to avoid the situation with your client. Have them be prepared. Give them talking points. Talk it through with them. A lot of times they might be able to handle it on their own, but work with them so that they understand the way to get their point across, because then you'll have a successful piece of press that you and their team can use going forward to further, again, whatever it is you're trying to achieve. And so same thing with the red carpet. What's going to be on there? If a client has endorsement deals, is there a sponsor for the party? Because if your client is the face of Ultimate Vodka, but the party is being sponsored by Grey Goose, you could be in a really bad situation. Now, the studio could have that deal with Grey Goose, so it's out of your control, but and they're not going to be forthcoming with that information because they don't necessarily need to, but you've got to say, okay, well, what's going on? Like, what component is Grey Goose factoring in? Get all that information, bring it back to the endorsement agent, say, this is the deal, what do we need to do? Do we need to avoid the step, like all that stuff, because otherwise, your client's on the carpet, they're seen with Grey Goose. Ultimate Vodka could go crazy, because they think they're in breach of contract. There's so many factors going on that you have to think about every single possible situation. I like to say that best case scenario, we've done all the work in advance. So when we're with our clients, when we're covering them, we don't really have to do much. We can just sort of sit back. We're there, obviously, in case something comes up, but it's all going according to plan because we've thought about every single possible scenario. Oh, who are you hiring for the company to drive the cars to the premiere? Seems innocent. Like, you might just assume they go with Diva or CLS. Maybe Audi's sponsoring it. The client has a deal with Volvo. Like, it's so many things like that. Is it an SUV? Is it a sedan? What color of the car? I mean, there's just so many little things that need to be paid attention to because it all comes into play. And unless your client doesn't know what they're walking into, they can't put their best foot forward. So it's just so important to vet everything, every bit of minutia, no details too small, leave every stone unturned so that you're comfortable and they're comfortable too.
And you talk about coaching, which is important. Literally last year, I was at an Oscar suite and, the gifting lounges, and I'm waiting for a client, and there's an actress being interviewed by Extra, and I'm standing right next to her, and they say, and she talked about, I got earrings from this place, and beautiful bracelet from here, and the interviewer says, what are you going to wear to the Oscars? Oh, I'm not going to the Oscars. Oh, which parties are you going to? You're going to Elton John? Are you going to Vanity Fair? No, I'm not going to any Oscar party. In fact, I think some friends and I were just going to hang out in pajamas and watch the Oscars at home. And I'm sitting there saying, like, these people flew in from Chicago and from New York to give you their jewelry to wear on the red carpet. And not every is, what we talk about coaching is just say, I haven't decided yet. I've been invited to so many things, that's it. Also, sometimes as far as coaching on red carpets, literally we can be standing next to not our client, but other clients who are being interviewed and say it's a charity event. Why is it important for you to be here tonight? It's important for me to be here. I'm so thrilled to be here. They worried about their hair and the makeup and who's going to escort them. They didn't take 5 minutes to read either the invitation or the website of what the charity even does, and you're going to be on camera. So obviously we prep and prepare our clients, but if you're going to a red carpet event, if you're going to a charity event, if you're going to a suite, just be prepared if a camera comes on you to have the right answers, and just do your homework before you get there. And if you're not going to the Oscars, you can take, an earring, just make up a story.
And there's also something that, you can do. You don't need a publicist. I'll tell you this. If you ever are at a photo shoot and there's an outfit that you are iffy about, that's going to be the cover if you put it on. Yeah. It's so you have to kind of be in control. And so many, actors, when they're starting out, they'll go shoot because I want these spec shoots and this, and you hear it, I mean, then you have these horrific pictures that come out when they're big A-listers, and you're like, well, why did you shoot? So it's also, taking control, and if there's something that doesn't feel right, don't do it, because you can't take it back. So like you said, there's so much we can't control, but I always think I always, some clients get media training when they're starting out, some don't, but I always say, you can answer any question any way you want. I mean, forget what the question is. If you've got what you want to get across, you can answer it. You can figure out a way to kind of spin it. So instead of telling our clients or the press, we never tell the press, like, don't say this. We just tell our clients, this is what you want to say. So figure out, I mean, I had a client, he asked about his girlfriend's birthday, and I mean, he turned that whole thing into the film. Well, birthdays are great, but we're going to go out and see this film. This film is about blah, 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 and we would laugh about it because, you can change a question and really answer it if you think about it. And there's nothing wrong with silence either. I think that so many times people get nervous, if it's an interview and it's your first interview and there's this quiet moment. And I think that journalists, they kind of thrive on that uncomfortable silence, and you're going to say something. If they're not asking you a question that you directly can think of the answer to, ask them to rephrase it. Ask them to ask another question. Don't just spit something out that is going to come back to bite you.
And nothing's off the record. Maybe in the studio days of the 30s, 40s, but once in a while you'll get a call saying, oh, I need some damage control on this because I told an interviewer this, but she said it was off the record. Nothing's off the record. No, it's especially in social media, someone to start tweeting or writing about it right away. If you don't want something out there that's really personal and private, then don't say it off the record or not. Just keep it to yourselves.
Speaking of that, we got some questions. For instance, sexual orientation was one of the questions. It seems to make headlines and magazine covers. How do you protect your clients who might want to protect that and keep things private? It seems to me that there are plenty of things that we need to keep private, and that's really up to us. But a lot of times we may need to communicate with you. So we really have a trust going back and forth so that you might know things ahead of time so that you're going to be able to put out fires should there be retroactive fires or something that leaks after the fact. And often it's probably not only what we say or do, but maybe just as powerfully what we don't do or what we don't say. Would you agree? Do you want to touch on the privacy issue that seems to be a concern for some of the folks here?
Yeah, I'm sure. I can start. I think, every situation is different because if it's a legal situation, a lot of times you cannot make a move without talking to the lawyer first. So that's definitely important to be aware of the severity of the situation. And otherwise, it comes back to your client being honest with you. It is much more helpful when a client proactively tells us something bad happens than for us to get a call, because then we can be ahead of it. We don't get I'll be honest, a lot of times, even with casting announcements, which is innocent, they'll be like, oh, I hear your client's in a movie. I'm like, great, news to me, so then I call the agent and manager because we're just not in the loop sometimes in that stuff. So the more information we can get in advance, the better, because then we can be proactive and strategic about how we want to handle it, release it. There's some, again, it varies in situations. Sometimes it's better to just, how like a kid and when you're little, if he would pick on you and then you sort of, if he gets a reaction, he'll keep going, right? But if he gets no reaction, he'll move on. It can be that way sometimes too with tabloids and gossip issues. It's not worth engaging. Sometimes just let it go. What do they say? Today's paper wraps tomorrow's fish. It'll blow over. Then there are times where you vehemently need to go on the record and say this is absolutely not true. Now, outlets are going to pick it up and sometimes they'll run your quote, sometimes they won't. Sometimes it's useful to have your client sort of beat them to the punch and tweet about it or Facebook it, whatever, it's in their own words. And that way, there's nothing more for us to say. It's like, look at their tweet. It really covers it all. I think in terms of privacy issues, we really believe that the press should be about a client's work because you guys are actors, and you play different roles, and that's what really should be drawing people to you. When you give too much away, I think it's hard for people to see you in anything else because they feel like they just know too much. So you should keep whatever you want to keep private, and you have every right to. And I think, like what Nicole was alluding to before, you're not just a sitting duck when you're doing an interview. You do not have to say something you don't want to. I know it's hard, but you have every right to say, you know what, thank you so much for asking. I'm just not going to answer that question. And then if the person asks again, you repeat it. You can repeat it 10 times till they finally get the hint, but you don't have to divulge anything you don't want to do. And you can keep anything private. I just think when you're lying about things, that's when you run into a lot of trouble, because people are going to call you out on it. It's going to come to light at some point, and it doesn't sit well with anyone. So I think that's really the only thing about privacy. Keep anything private, just don't lie. Unless, of course, again, there's some legal thing going on and you literally can't say anything. It's better to say nothing than to lie.
Nowadays, with papers not being so prevalent, websites are probably not likely to be wrapping fish, so anything that's out there is going to stay out there. What percentage of your day is proactive, and what percentage is actually putting out fires?
But you know what, you're right, but it also can get buried very quickly. So I remember, when like Perez, when he used to be a little bit snarkier, and now he's obviously much nicer, but you'd be like, okay, it's only 12 o'clock in the afternoon, it's already on page 6 of Perez, we're fine, like you're in the clear. You almost hope you don't wish anyone anything bad to happen to anyone, but it's kind of nice when something else goes on that then will trump what you're dealing with, because you can get buried so quickly and then it's done. It can really run the cycle in like 48 hours. Pretty much. And it's funny because it's good in a way, because I remember when I started, you were like waiting all week long for every single weekly to break, and then, depending on when it broke, it might miss that issue, so then you're waiting a week and a half, and it was just like, it felt like time took forever. Now it's kind of quick, and it's like over in 48 hours, and you move on.
And honesty absolutely is the best policy, because, sometimes it comes to shoot you, where, you ask the client, did this happen? No, it did not happen. No, it did not happen. So you tell the 5 journalists that called within the last half hour, no, it did not happen. No. And then the next day, well, kind of, it did happen. Well, then you have to go back. At least if you have the, information, you can, devise a plan. As far as privacy, it's, up to each individual person. I had a client that we were doing a home shoot for a major magazine, and they said, oh, and can we do the bedroom shoot? No, you're not doing the bedroom. Oh, no, this is part of the deal. This is a deal breaker. No, we're shooting his bedroom. I said, no, you're not shooting his bedroom. So I said, then we'll cancel the shoot. No, it's tomorrow, in a day and a half, and we have all this settled. I said, you're not shooting his bedroom. And then it finally came back like the day before the shoot. Can we shoot the guest bedroom? Yeah, the guest bedroom you can shoot. So it's where, that client wanted privacy and said absolutely no one in the bedroom, which a lot of clients will say. So it's really, but having that honesty with your clients, closing the door and saying, this is what happened. Okay, at least we have now a plan to deal with it, as opposed to getting a phone call out of the blue and then not knowing what to do with it.
And answering in a polite way. I mean, I think that sometimes people want to get a reaction, and if somebody asks something and a client just says, you know what, I respect you for asking that question, and please respect me for not answering it, what's a journalist really going to say to that? I mean, it's kind of a really nice way, and you're in and out of it. And even if they print that, I mean, what's wrong with that? So it's not just going like, oh, I can't believe it, get my publicist here. I mean, that's just creating drama where there doesn't need to be one. I don't want to answer it. Boom, and it's kind of done.
Let's take a few questions from folks who are here. Here's one from Chudy 2, who I just worked with on Raising Hope. Hello. Are red carpet events important, and how can we best utilize them?
I mean, I think there was a good point brought up of if you know that you've been going out for a role and maybe, a casting agent, you've gone, you've read for it, and you're close to getting it, and maybe one of the producers or the director is going to be there, it's their film. Use it as, I think if you use parties and red carpets as, again, it's work. I think that the trouble people get into is like, oh, this is going to be a fun event. Okay, this is work. I mean, your work is a little more glamorous than our work, but it shouldn't be a fun event. You should always go dressed appropriately, know why you're there, consider it a work event, know the other people there, know the actors that are going to be there. So when you're speaking to people, and I mean, even early on when I first started as an assistant, when I got to go to events with my boss, I would literally take look at pictures of like who the agents were. I remember we had like a chart of like, this is Ed Lamato and this is, and so when we saw them, if we were in contact with our client's agent, we would know them by name so that they would remember. Instead of being like, who are you? We would say, well, you know, you represent 3 of my clients, so you would help that agent out. So I think it's the same thing, like do a little homework. If you get to go to an event, know who's going to be there and maybe know the people that you might want to talk to. And if you're speaking to that director, it's like, I loved your work and so and so and so, know what they've done. Or if you're sitting at a table, like we always ask for our clients, who's going to be at their table? And then if we need to send them bios or whatever it is, you know, if they're going to the Variety Power of Women event, we'll know who's at that table because you should be going to that for networking purposes. So if you're ever going to an event because you think it's going to be fun, I don't think you're really doing your job.
And I mean, a good rule of thumb, if there is a legitimate reason for you to be there, go. If not, stay home. It's really as simple as that. A legitimate reason could be a work purpose. If you're going to support a friend, for example, that's great, but then maybe you don't do the carpet, you know, because it might look like you're trying to upstage your friend's moment. Maybe this film that your friend is in is super tiny, so any star power could actually help support it. So doing the carpet would show your support, but then you'd maybe do photos only as opposed to doing interviews because it's not about you. But in a nutshell, if there's a legitimate reason, go and do it right. Like as Nicole said, do your hair, do your makeup, do your research, go there prepped. Otherwise, again, stay home because it's not worth having the image out there when when you look at Wire Image and Getty, you want a consistency, you know, of just looking fantastic all the time. Looking like a hot mess on the carpet, like no one's going to care. Then like magazines aren't going to want to feature you. That all plays into it. Design, you know, I think we can all agree that the worlds of fashion and entertainment have become so enmeshed as of late. I mean, again, when I started, much more separate, but now like the Met Ball is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest event to go to, sort of that and the Oscars. It's like the 2 most important things in Hollywood. And the Met Ball's a fashion event, you know, but that's huge because you're being seen with a designer. If you're an up-and-comer on an amazing designer's arm, that could get you your next movie role. It leads to endorsements campaigns. So all of that stuff is really important. But again, you want to go out enough where it makes sense, but you don't want to go out too much where people are sick of you, because then it's like, oh, here you are again, the opening of an envelope. You're making yourself too accessible. It's like no one cares, you know.
I mean, I even remember there was this one girl, I still don't even know her name, but I would see her on every red carpet, and I would even ask the photographers, because they would take pictures. I was like, who is she, you know? And I would see her everywhere. And so I think if you pick and choose which ones you go to, and I think they've made it easy too. Like there's places where you can go and get your hair blown for $35, and so you're not doing that 3 times a week. Then maybe that's the investment for this month of like, it makes sense. My friend's in this film. My agent told me that maybe I need more photos on Wire Image or whatnot. So you spend that money to really put it together, and so those photos last, and you have them, and you just really pick and choose it.
Let's go back to relationships a little bit. Here's, well, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to read this name, but Sean, perhaps. How do we find a job as a publicist? And I think maybe along those lines, one of the things that I wanted to ask you was that if you're in a big enough firm and you're looking to maybe hire someone into PR, what do you look for? Because that might also tip us off as to who's going to do a good job for you, and if they're going to do a good job for you, then who's going to do a good job for us? What do you look for?
Well, I'll tell you I said earlier I had a Warren Cowan story. So, and again, not that I'm a brain scientist. When someone said, introduce you to Warren Cowan, I said, okay. So Warren Cowan called me. I said, can you come in tomorrow? I said, yeah. He said, you have a resume? So I said, of course I have a resume. So he says, okay, you bring it in. So that night I got all ready and got my resume ready. I said, I'm not bringing my resume. And what I did was I typed a press release, and I said, it's either going to work or not work. I said, Warren Cowan hires Richard Hoffman. And I did a whole press, and I put my bio within the press release. So I go meet Warren, and I'm sitting at a big desk, and he says, give me your resume. And I handed it, a little tiny smile came up, and he looked at me, and that's when he said, I don't know you, you don't know me, and that's how it started. But I think, people looking for people who want to be publicists or work for your firm it's important dedication and commitment, But also, sometimes I'll meet someone, I'll be in an elevator, and I'll say, did you see, she looks beautiful. Who was that? They have no idea who a certain actor or actress is. If you want to be a pharmacist, be a pharmacist. If you're going to work in the industry, I always say, there were films before Star Wars. There were TV shows before what's on now. Is get to know who actors and actresses are. Get to know at least some of the publications also. You don't have to be an expert in everything, but go to a newsstand and sit by a Starbucks and read some of the publications and at least have a working knowledge of why you want to be in it. And sometimes I'll say to someone, why do you want to be a publicist? Come up with an answer. I mean, why do you want to be here? Do you like working with, journalists? Do you like one-on-one relationships with actors and actresses? Why do you want to be here? So that's part of the puzzle also. Just come prepared to a meeting if you're looking for a job in a publicity firm.
And I also think don't be afraid to, start from the bottom and work your way up. I think that you can learn contacts, but there's things that you can't learn. For a publicist, quick thinking and common sense, and not in a bad way. Not everyone has that kind of problem-solving common sense. So for me, if I know someone's maybe been a waiter or a waitress, I kind of like that because I think, gosh, they're used to dealing with high volume all at once and have to be pleasant while they're thinking about how to solve problems. I can kind of teach them the rest. I mean, you should have a general interest, but I think that, if you've tried and you've looked online and you're not seeing these job openings, and then maybe finally the front reception is open at a huge firm. Well, the firms like to hire within when assistant jobs are open. So there's nothing wrong with if you keep trying to take a job like that and really work. I mean, Cindy Berger, who's my boss, and she started as the receptionist at PMK before it was PMK BNC, and we're all answering to her. So I think that you have to pay your dues, like anything. So I think that's important.
Yeah, and I think if you want to be there bad enough, you will take any position, like even the receptionist. I mean, I can tell you at ID in the talent department, every single publicist was a receptionist or assistant at some point. We love to promote from within. Agreed. I don't care if you have experience in PR or not. Sometimes it's better if they don't, because then you don't have to undo maybe some bad habits that they learned. You just need to be smart, a quick thinker, someone who doesn't get rattled under pressure, can handle everything with elegance and grace. You have to have a poker face at all times. You have to multitask like no other. You are on the phone while you're dealing with 600 to 1,000 emails every single day, while you're IMing with someone, while you're on the internet looking at something, while you're in 7 different schedules and doing 10 different memos. You have a million balls that you're juggling all the time. And what happens is you have to have an organized system, because there's only so much you can do until someone gets back to you. So it's sort of like you throw a ball up in the air and it's got to stay in the air until you get that piece of information and the ball's back in your court, and then you can run with it, and then you need something else, and then you have to throw it back up, and you're in a holding pattern. And it's knowing, when am I following up too soon and I'm being annoying to this person, and then I'm really going to piss them off and they're not going to work with me anymore? Or when am I following up in an appropriate manner to be able to get my clients the info in advance? You have to be so detailed oriented, but also thinking about the big picture at the same time. A lot of times, I'm sure you guys know, you will plan, and then everything will change. You just have to keep going. You cannot think about the fact that you spent 20 hours putting together a press schedule that's been canceled because your client got a job. That literally cannot rattle you. You just have to say, okay, moving on to the next thing. You have a 7-city tour, now it needs to be condensed, and you've lost 3 cities. How do you rejigger everything? It's like just coming up with solutions, being very resourceful, and basically we hire people who want our jobs. I have a phenomenal assistant right now. She's been with me for a year. She's a quick learner. She mastered the basics pretty early on. So now it's incorporating her into more stuff that I do, so she stays engaged. She's pitching, she's covering, because I want her to get to that next place. If I keep her chained to my desk, it's just not going to be fun. I don't have her pick up my laundry. I don't have her make reservations, because that doesn't teach her anything. And I think also, if I lose the ability to do that stuff, that just affects everything, as me as an individual. So we really want people who basically want our jobs.
And you also have to, I think, really care, because what we do is really 24 hours. I mean, I kind of feel like, and I don't know, you guys, my clients are kind of, I personally, their successes personally affect me, and you know, hopefully they're very long-term. Like you said, we're not here to just promote one thing. I mean, these are long-term, 5, 10, 15-year clients that you saw starting out and now maybe nominated for awards. So there's no like, oh, well, this was my time, you know, sorry, it's a weekend. That doesn't really happen in our business, so it has to be someone that's willing to dedicate that and you know, really genuinely care. I mean, even like this weekend with New York Fashion Week, well, there's a snowstorm and a car doesn't get here, and you just got to be able to think quickly and not say, it's Saturday at 8 a.m., why are you bothering me, kind of thing.
Talking about relationships, and I know you had mentioned earlier that life is just too short, that you get to pick and choose, right? So often, I presume prospective clients will come to you, but do you ever go out and do you seek someone based on the work or whatever they're doing?
Oh yeah, for sure. Because it's, I mean, at the end of the day, you want to be passionate about your clients, right? If you're not excited about something, you're not going to give it your all. So there have been times where I've gotten new business calls and it's a great person, but I'm just not the right fit. Like, I've never seen the show, or I'm just like not into that type of person. It's nothing against them. It's just sort of not in my excitement wheelhouse, I guess. So I'll refer it to someone else in the company, because then if we can keep it in-house, it's just better for the company. And ultimately, it's going to be better for that client because they're getting someone who's like a diehard fan and has known everything about them. You know, you always want any representative you have, whether you're at a big agency, small agency, whatever, publicist, agent, manager, lawyer, business manager, they need to be passionate about you. That's the most important thing. And I think, but yes, I mean, there's plenty of times you'll see a movie, a TV show, you're so excited. I mean, there's nothing more fun than discovering someone that you seek out. And maybe they had one line, but I mean, I've had a client like that. He had one line and he just stuck with me. And I reached out to the manager and agent and I said, listen, this might sound weird and this is very premature, but I loved your client in this. And they're like, okay, you know, it was one line. I'm like, I know, but it resonated with me. So I'm just telling you, when the time comes, because I know it will, I'd love to be considered. And I just, you know, I'll set like Google alerts on some random sort of unknowns like that, because it's a little bit hard sometimes to track them if you're not seeing their work all the time. And you'll get a Google alert about someone. And then you just reach out to the agent again and say, I just saw his video that he posted up with Funny or Die. It was hilarious. It's just a good way to keep in touch organically. And those people can be the next, you know, who knows what. I mean, and then there have been times where I've been called about clients and I had no idea who they were. And I'm so glad that I was called because I love them and they're some of my favorite people. But I think it just all sort of works itself out.
Yeah, and it depends. You know, also a lot of clients come through referrals, and sometimes if a client's not right for you, you might say, you know, I have a friend who's a publicist, that might work too. But also, I'll share a quick story, is a television actress joined a daytime drama. I read one line that she was joining it. I called and said, I've always admired her work. Can I set up a meeting? Does she have a publicist? No, she doesn't have a publicist. And 4 days later, met her and the manager, and by the time I got back to the office, I got a phone call saying, she loved you and it's going to work out. So I said, oh, what made you go with me? You know, in the first place, it set up a meeting. He said, you were the only one who called. So sometimes you never know how life works out. But
And that goes back to when you guys are on set, you know, if you're doing something for CBS or NBC, or if you're doing a film and there's a unit publicist, there's been very many times where we'll get a referral on, like, you know, hey, this person did a guest star and I think that they're going to be someone big you might want to call. Like, those publicists at the studios and the networks, they kind of tip us off because we have relationships with them. So by allowing yourself to be known and present when you're there, you're going to be on their radar. And I mean, I've gotten a few calls from studio people and even unit publicists going like, listen, you might not want this person now, but I'm telling you, they're going to be a big star. They've been amazing. Watch out for them. So you just be active in your own careers. Like you were saying, don't let someone, you know, well, she didn't come up to me. Well, that's, you know, it's not an excuse. Be assertive, be active in your career, be responsible for your own growth. And that's always helpful.
You talked about collaboration and being an integral part of a team. If your client wants will you help him or her get a new manager or agent?
I don't like to meddle in that stuff because it can open up a whole can of worms that, again, life is too short. And it's not wise to be thought of as that publicist who tries to take away business. I mean, there are times, yes, we'll see someone and we're like, they're amazing, and we just seek them. But a lot of our business is from incoming calls. So if a manager or agent thinks that you're someone who is like taking away their clients, they're not going to call you. I'm a huge believer in direct conflict resolution in every single facet of your life. So I'm not going to stick my nose in that business ever. Yes, there are times when clients will come to us and say, I'm really bummed that this person did this, or I'm not feeling this, or whatever, and I will press back on them to have that conversation, because I don't think it's fair, and myself included, if we're doing something wrong or something's not working, you need to give that person a chance. You need to make them aware. They may not be aware, they may be aware, it may be intentional, may not. You've got to give them a chance to see where you're coming from, air, the issues that you're having in a non-confrontational way so that you can just both work through it and move on, so it's not some weirdness hanging over your head. Because I feel like if you then decide to sever ties, you can feel good about it because you'll say, you know what, I was honest, I was forthcoming, I let them know what my issues were. It didn't change, so I'm moving on. Now look, will a representative ever acknowledge that you gave them that time? Maybe yes, maybe not. It's hard if you get fired, but I just think it's really better to be above board, have your clients be the ones who are having that feedback. Maybe if it's an issue with the manager, you say, okay, if you're not comfortable talking to your manager, talk to your agent about it. Maybe the agent can then talk to the manager. It's sometimes easier to hear it from a third party than the client directly. But I think it's better to really not get involved in those situations. It can be a bit messy. It's just,
sure, and beyond the situation of possibly poaching,
Yeah.
if someone does not even have one,
Mm-hmm.
then you probably have no issue with it since you already have established relations. Is
Right,
that-
then you can make recommendations. But I agree also, if someone has an agent or a manager, don't get involved. If they don't have one, then that's a different conversation. And it also goes for us as well. There's kind of a common courtesy within Publicists, with clients. And I got a call about a prospective client, and they had a falling out with their publicist, and I said, okay, so they left them. No, well, they're still with them until, July 31st. I'm like, then August 1st, you call me. I'm not, jeopardized. If they had a falling out and it's over with, yes, it's over with. And I said, I'm not going to start working in the middle of July while she's with someone else. So it's a common courtesy, but I agree with agents and managers, it's just not an area I go to if they already have one.
And you also don't want to be blamed if you have a great relationship with your client and they ask you to suggest some manager and maybe that person really didn't work out, it could hurt your relationship. So maybe you give them a list of, these are the people that that I enjoy working with, and maybe it's a little bit of a longer list as opposed to just one person, because it could ruin your relationship with your client if that goes sour.
So let's talk a little bit about, for those of us who don't know, Melissa is asking this question, for those of us who don't know what is involved in putting together a press kit, what is in it, and how can we benefit from this before we even leverage your services?
I mean, I think that, we were saying a bio, and I've seen a lot of, it's a new thing. For when I first started, it didn't happen at all, but a lot of actors and actresses are writing their bios in the first person. Like, if they're really great writers and, but it's a bio, and any kind of press clippings that you have, whether it's, reviews that include you, magazines, I mean, whatever you can put together that represents that work that you did. And, even if someone, like a local TV station wants to interview, that's, again, that tape that you're going to use, because you can be a great actor and you can have a terrible personality. I mean, most comedians, and I'm not offending your clients, but most of the great comedians are really not that funny in real life. It's weird. But so they don't know you're a great actor, but you might not be a good interview. So anything that can show these people that you can actually engage, with somebody and have a conversation and be engaging is good. I mean, anything you can put together. I mean, you don't want to go and take a whole photo shoot and have, 15 pages of different photos and poses, and that's really not about the work so much. because it's not a casting, so it's really more press material.
And also, you know, we talked earlier about websites. Have a website ready. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars. Get a friend or a cousin or someone who's very computer savvy and put on your bio, put on some photos. And at the end of the day, you know, if a journalist goes onto your website, well, has he done an interview before? Is he going to look down and say, you know, the tennis scene, whatever? Have those. That's, again, the building process. Have contact information. And it doesn't have to be this big, splashy website, but be ready to go with it. Have your domain name already in place, because you don't want to have to then go searching, or some people have to pay other people to get their names back. So, and that's years of involving litigation. So, yeah, just have a website or a press kit with just, you know, some simple things to start out with, and you can build from there.
And I also think your press kit is, you know, always evolving, and it's also changing, because where is this press kit going? Okay, is this the agent or manager sending it to a casting agent? Are you using it to pitch to get something? You need to tailor that press kit accordingly, because is the editor, the producer, whatever, they're not going to look at 45 pages. They're just not. So you have to really cull it down and make it targeted and specific to what it is that you're trying to achieve and the person that it's going to. So we're changing them all the time. I mean, constantly. And it is, you don't want a dated press kit, because like, that's great if you have an amazing feature in GQ, but if it's from 2003, that's 10 years ago. Like, it's almost better to not include that, because it almost says, okay, we've not gotten anything of this level since then. That was a decade ago. You know, so you've really, so it's like, how do you keep things fresh? And I think, you know, especially with social media and everything, that's playing a component into our press kits. You know, we're including, if a client writes a great, you know, Funny or Die video, or they come up with a funny spoof or something, we include that, because everything now is press. There's so much of it, whether it's their endorsement, whether it's their Twitter stuff, whether it's anything. So it's not just print stuff anymore. It's an ever-evolving press kit. You're also trying to find, we're always looking for new mediums to make the press kits more interesting to look at, whether it's the flip book thing is a newer one I've just seen about. It's just, it's important for it to be engaging, because otherwise, if you're just scrolling through like lots of online articles that have been cut and paste, that's boring. Like, no one wants to look at that. So sometimes less is more to really get your point across. And then also, are you doing an awards campaign? Should it be like quote heavy specific? You know, it's always constantly changing.
So we've got about 10 or 15 minutes before we wrap up. Let's try to hit a few more questions. One of the things you brought on, you brought up websites and online presence, and you know, you talked about also going to certain events and not just to be seen, but you know, I've heard time and again, and we probably all heard, be seen and be good, and getting our faces out there and also getting our work out there. Web series are becoming so predominant. And, I mean, they're practically a dime a dozen nowadays. So is there any particular advice that you might give us to bring exposure to the web series?
Do you have like distribution? Are you self-distributing these web series, or is it like with a Yahoo or something? Is it?
Yes, let's say we're distributing it ourselves. If you want to abstain, you could use one of your passes like you talked about before.
Well, I think posting it all, if you have, obviously a key is a Facebook page, or if you tweet as well, so putting on a Facebook page with links. And also, I'm sure, you know, just getting the word out about the web series is there are certain journalists, especially bloggers online, who write about, their specialty is online. So it's maybe doing some research, finding out who those bloggers are, and say, you know, I want to send you a clip or episode 1 from the web series. And hopefully they'll start blogging about it. That'll get some, you know, momentum going.
Jillian approves. So let's talk a little bit about pricing. I know folks are curious, especially those who have never engaged in a relationship with a PR firm before. Is it a la carte? Are there various services? Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I think we all kind of work on the same. Publicists go month to month. It's a retainer, and that retainer obviously would vary. But the goal is you should never be stuck. I mean, I've heard of people I met with this one guy once, and he was a designer, and he said, do you sign long-term contracts? Because I signed a year-long contract with this firm, and then I got cancer. And this is a true story. And they made me pay. And I was like, wow. And we always think, it's, month to month, but like Jillian said, it's not, okay, my film comes out next month. It takes a long time to do those long leads, but most of it is, month to month with a 4-month minimum. And then if you want to end that relationship, you end it before you find another publicist, and the fees vary.
We have more or less the same fee across the board for people. We definitely aren't willing to cut deals because we shouldn't work for free. No one works for free, and when you're working for free, you're just not going to be as passionate, and then you're not going to do the job that you should be doing. And just as your agents and managers, take 10%, they don't take 2% because it's a first film or it was an indie film with no budget. They still get their 10%. So I would say across the board, we don't cut deals. We keep a consistent rate, because also, if you think about it, if you cut a deal, you could have 2 different clients who have the same manager. So the manager knows, and then you're throwing one a bone and it's too complicated. So just keep it easy, consistent fees, and then it's just, I think, easier for everyone.
But don't hire a publicist and then in 3 weeks say, like, you got me nothing, so I'm done. Because it takes us time to actually, when we're talking to editors and talking to magazines and talk shows and bringing you up and setting the material and pitching. And so like anything, it is a process. And you can't just expect, you're going to sign with someone and in 3 weeks you're going to be all over the place, because that's unrealistic.
Let's touch on a couple, probably some things that we could knock out pretty quickly. Here's one from Teresa, who writes in from online. Thank you for joining us, Teresa. All the time, top PR firms are offering to sell me packages to increase my IMDb star meter. Should I run? I suspect that she should run the other way very quickly, right? Okay. With IMDb Pro, there's a star meter. There's a little. Right. Yes, it's a sham. So run, Teresa. Another question was, how do I know whether or not I'm actually going to be cut out of something? And maybe I can answer this, because my manager actually suggested that I do so, and I contacted the casting director, and then she contacted production. They were able to get right back to me. Do you have any other suggestions regarding that, to know whether you're in a project?
I don't deal with so much them getting cut out, because it's, we're really promoting what exists, not what ended up on the floor. So I don't know. I would hope you'd hear about that from your agent or manager.
Yeah.
I think that's normally what happens, yeah.
What about when your client is photographed at an event, do you have any kind of approval over the photos, for instance, before they wind up on website? Or is it basically, if we're out in the public eye, anything goes?
There's a very interesting thing, and I'm not going to mention who it was, but last week there was the whole, I don't know if you guys saw it, a website picked up, a publicist emailed one of the big photo agencies and said, please take down these 4 photos of one of the biggest stars in the world, and they circulated it out. So remember, email is really, we're in a different area now, so really watch emails and watch what you put in writing, because those things can come back to bite you. So if that happens, and I've had it, we have relationships. If there's, thousands of photos and there's 2 that your client really doesn't like, you pick up the phone and say, would you mind taking these down? And usually it's not a problem if it's once a year or whatnot, but watch what you put in writing, because it can come back to bite you.
I think really the only time you would have approval over event photos is if you're there for an endorsement, and contractually you've approval over every single material that goes out, and they have one photographer that they've hired who's going to do the approvals. Otherwise, that's it. And by the way, even if they have that one photographer that they've hired, if there are other photographers at the event, you're not going to have approval of them. So, and that just sort of all goes back to what we were saying. It's like, if you're going to go somewhere, look appropriate, make sure hair and makeup is done, because again, it's all there. And truly, the landscape has changed so much. everything is a press event. People walk out of their homes, unfortunately, and there's press there. So all those photos are going to be there. I mean, I know sometimes some advice is if the more boring you are, they're going to lose interest. So if you're finding that like paparazzi are stalking you when you're going running every day, if you're wearing the same thing every single time, it's like they can't keep running the same image over and over. So you kind of like if you try and like force their hand a little, so they're like, okay, there's no point for us to sit here at 6 in the morning, I had a situation once where a client was leaving an event and a paparazzi was following her, and she called me because she was it's scary, and so we did a little trick of a switcheroo of the cars, and her car continued on and the paparazzi continued on, but she was actually in my car, and then it could take her home safely. So it's just, you can, I guess I strayed a little bit from the point, but there's cameras everywhere, and so that's why you just have to, again, be prepared. Same thing with an answer. Questions are going to come at you all the time. We can't stop that. You've just got to be prepared.
But if you notice, too, it's interesting. It's worse for women, but again, you don't see, there's certain people that you go through the tabloids, and they are still going out and taking their kids to school, but it's very rarely that you see pictures of Denzel or George Clooney or Meryl Streep just like walking around, and they do leave their house. So there's some people that garner more attention because of what they do instead of because of their work. And so I think those are the people that have more of a problem, and it's a kind of a catch-22 in that sense. Not so much the younger ones, it's harder, but I think the more established ones.
Anush asks, it's actually a two-part question. Would you run away from a publicist if they don't reveal who they've repped? That seems like a pretty reasonable thing to do. But I think you would be able to see most of their clients, if not all of their clients, on IMDb if you have IMDb Pro, right? The other question, what are the most important questions to ask when interviewing a publicist?
Okay, I think you should ask them about their strategy for the projects that you've got coming up and beyond. And I think you should be forthcoming with what you want to achieve in your career and see what sort of game plan they can give you. I know for myself, like I don't go into a new business meeting unless I know who the person is. If I don't, but I'm interested, I need to see their material. I need to see what I'm working with so I can give a game plan for the immediate projects. But then I'll also touch upon things that haven't existed yet and how we'll want to save some stuff for later for that even unknown project, and how, if they have, dreams of directing one day, like how we'll work in tandem with them to alter our approach, because truly every single press campaign that you do, even for the same client, is going to be completely different. And so I think you should definitely ask them about strategy. I think you should ask them how they work as a person, because they're going to be representing you, and how communicative they are with the press and with you and with your team, and how you'll be able to, honestly, I think you can pretty much get a read on someone in 5 minutes if you're going to work well with them or not. And same with us. Like there are times I've come out of meetings and I just call the agent or manager afterwards and I say, listen, I don't think I'm right for this person. Because you can get a sense they're going to have unrealistic expectations and you're just never going to make them happy, and it's not worth it. So then you can sort of say that to the agent or manager, and then they can hopefully maybe just get you out in terms of like when the client asks them for their recommendation, they sort of swing it another way.
I think it's key also for if a publicist doesn't ask you in the first meeting or at least the second about, what do you like to do? What charities are you involved in? What are some of your hobbies? Because then it's not just all about the work. It's like, oh, well, you enjoy reading. I want to get you involved with, this event, or you like doing this. So I think if they're not asking you also, I'm not talking about very personal questions, but if they're not asking you questions outside of the work realm as well, that might be an indication. And also, you'll know, exactly like you're saying, chemistry, that'll tell you right away in the room if you're feeling, that vibe, if you want to be with that person. And also, the long term, like you were saying before about the long term, saying, this is what I see a year from now, this is what I maybe see 2 years from now, and if it's going to be a team effort and a building process, and also asking, if publicists should say, what are your goals? Yeah. What are you looking for?
I always like to ask too, like if there was maybe one or two people's careers that you think you'd like to emulate or love the path that they took throughout their career. I ask that to just kind of gauge what kind of celebrity they want to be, what kind of actor they want to be, and that could very much change over the course of 10 years, but just getting an idea initially of who they think has done it right is kind of helpful.
Jillian, Richard, Nicole, thank you for spending time with us tonight.